He had a very great conversion experience later in life. He had been born to a wealthy family, was injured in battle in Pamplona in a battle with the French, and during his convalescence he started to read books. And there were really only 2 books available to him in that convalescence. One was A Life of Christ, not a Bible, but almost a biography of Christ. And one was a book about the lives of the saints. And he started to daydream, like all of us daydream, about, great feats of glory that we'll achieve one way or the other. And for us, it might be winning the Academy Award or shooting that final shot in the NBA playoffs. For Ignatius, it had to do with being a hero in battle, being loved by women and adored. And so he started to daydream about those things, and then he would daydream about the lives of the saints. And he noticed that the daydreams he had about the lives of the saints stayed with him longer and were more meaningful to him. And there was this kind of slow metamorphosis, this slow change in him, where he really decided to kind of hand himself over. And so he finished that convalescence, left, and in true chivalric fashion handed over sword and armor and all of that at a statue of Mary, and took the clothes of a beggar and went on really a sojourn that lasted some time after that. But the first thing he realized was that he didn't have much education. Because he had been born to a life of privilege, he hadn't needed to. So Ignatius is really the quintessential adult student and lifelong learner. He went back to school to learn Latin, to get a basic education, and then he tried a couple of different universities before he ended up at the University of Paris, where he gathered a group of college buddies, really, around him, who found him attractive and interesting and charismatic. And they wanted to give themselves to something too. And it's that same thread that began with Ignatius, just kind of a regular guy with some college buddies, that perdures now in our universities when students come together and they have this sense in themselves that they want to give their lives to something, someone bigger than who they are. And so that's the door we walk through with them. And we walk through it in healthcare, we walk through it in business, we walk through it in their lives outside the classroom, but we meet them there and we try to help them open that desire a little wider and broader during their years at Marquette. Well, Ignatius was really a man of the Renaissance, and the Renaissance was a time when all of these inclinations toward faith and toward art and toward imagination were a little more easily integrated with the rest of one's life. I think our students today face a real pressure from our culture to be fractionalized. To have a work life and a home life and a social life and a civic life and all of those pieces. And that in addition to the tremendous wave of information that comes at them every day, certainly not just in the classroom, but through the media and through all of their relationships, the digital age and their own interactions, in terms of online information that is coming at them. It's a huge pressure on them. And so to try to help them integrate and also to prioritize the kinds of information at any given moment that are important to integrate. This Ignatian skill of reflection that comes directly out of the spiritual exercises of Ignatius, the retreat that was such a guiding force for him and a model for him, is an especially important thing for us now in this era because there are so few opportunities for our students to reflect and really to put the pieces together. And that means that we need to help our faculty know how to walk with students as they do that. We need to give students the tools and also the space and the time to do that reflection so that when they leave Marquette, that habit of returning daily to a regular pattern of reflection and to absorb the relationships and the information and everything that's been a part of their day is tremendously important. It'll make them better business people and healthcare workers and teachers and advocates. It'll make them better parents and better spouses too. Ignatius really started from the premise that there's no question too big for God. And so a strong adherence in Jesuit schools to academic freedom, to critical thinking, to asking tough questions is something that we gravitate toward rather than away from. And also inherent in that is the assumption that God is to be found in all of those questions. Not easily, not quickly, maybe after a lifelong search, but that it's worth the doing. And it's worth the doing in dialogue with people who don't always agree with each of us individually, or people who have new information or perspectives to share with us. So it's important that Jesuit schools be both Catholic and Jesuit in their root and their anchor, that they're connected to a tradition of faith and justice that is tremendously important, and also be pluralistic and diverse. Our students are never going to learn to see the face of God in every person if they haven't seen many faces of God during their college years. And that applies to the material as well. An Ignatian approach to teaching would mean that it's not the student against the teacher. There's no dialectic there. It's the teacher and the student against the material in that exploration together. And critical thinking, to use one's mind and heart and ultimately one's hands for service, are inextricable things as part of a Jesuit education. Well, I think Jesuit education, like all higher education, is scrambling to keep up with the technological age. It moves much faster than anybody I know in any kind of work, and so we're constantly asking that question. But the educational system is such that it's built on an understanding that we're involved in a learning community. And so some of that community is right here at Marquette, if we think about that as a table that we're all sitting at. And at the table are the students and the faculty and the others who make up the university, and others in the higher education community, and others in our world. The other people at that table who are often voiceless, I think, in other circumstances are the poor and the marginalized. And one of the things that the technological age can do for us, if we make use of it in good and life-giving ways, is that it can give us access to people we never would have had access to before, or information about cultures and traditions we never would have had access to before. And so it's important to let those people in particular, through technology and through other means, make a claim on us. Who is it that our teaching and research are responding to? Who are the we? When we say we are Marquette, for example, who is the we to whom we are referring? That's a very wide-armed concept. And we continue to try to make it broader and more welcoming. So technologically, there are so many things that can be integrated into the classroom, into what would be traditionally looked at as a Jesuit ratio studiorum, or a plan of studies, a way of teaching. And there are traditions within Jesuit education that are time-honored and very valuable. But the means of delivering that, whether it's technological or face-to-face, is perhaps less important than the fact that the interaction is taking place. Deep in the roots of Jesuit education is a desire to embrace new modes of educating students. Ignatius took from the best in developing his educational system during his time, and that continues to happen in Jesuit schools. We borrow and learn from the best of our culture, and so technology is certainly an extremely important part of how we not just deliver but engage education in Jesuit schools. It brings us closer to other people, and it pushes us on some ethical questions in terms of access to education and the breadth of knowledge that we're trying to tap and explore. So there are important questions that are particular to this time and place, but they wouldn't be foreign to Ignatius. Ignatius was always looking for the new and the possible, for what he would label the greater glory of God. If it serves the good, the common good, and the people of God, then it's a good thing.